A year ago today, Star Citizen felt almost unplayable, plagued with issues from 30Ks to just random game crashes. I was afraid to actually bring out any good gear or actually use anything that I didn't find in a bunker and was very easily replaceable. Today, a year later, the game is different. The game actually plays. I'm not afraid to take out my good armor and actually show it off for orc events and that type of thing. Now, it's not to say it's not without its issue today, but this past year has been absolutely evolutionary for Star Citizen. And I want to take some time and actually reflect on exactly what's happened in the past year. Now, it's obviously that time of year between Christmas and New Year's where a lot of people take a second to reflect on the previous year with hopes to improve the year ahead. Now, it could be a holiday thing. It could just be the fact that people have a bit of time to do this, or it could actually be a really good routine. But that being said, I think it's well worth doing. Now, just to be clear, this is not about the patches and the ships. This is really about how the game and the players themselves have actually changed. It's maybe not even the players, but even the fans have changed. So while we're having this talk, I'm actually going to be delivering some Luminalia gifts. Now, this is a mission type that you find under the package delivery section in your multi-glass, and if you're new to the game, it's actually a really easy way to earn some extra credits. Just in the time to record this video, I actually earned about 250,000 credits. Now, that's not nearly what you can earn by doing things like mining, etc. When you consider that this can be done with just about any ship in the game, it's definitely worthwhile considering. And also, 'tis the season. Let's take a brief trip down memory lane and take a look at what the game looked like exactly a year ago today. So Pyro had just launched. Everybody was super excited because the second star system was finally put into the game. But unfortunately, I very distinctly remember trying to log on between Christmas and New Year's and simply being presented with errors. I couldn't access the game. I couldn't even log in. Now, it was a particularly bad time right after Pyro launched, and I don't think it's actually been that bad in quite a while. But still, a year ago today, I couldn't even log in. Now, in all fairness, this was at a time in the game where every time that they launched a patch, the players really just expected it to suck for the next week. I can't say that has really changed a lot over the past year, but what has changed is how bad it actually gets. Pyro was a major undertaking with a ton of new features and a ton of new development, and the game was really rough to play for probably a good 2 to 3 weeks. And unfortunately, in CIAG's infinite wisdom, they love to drop these major patches on us and then go on holidays. So all of the suffering that we had done between Christmas and New Year's largely was due to the fact that most of their team was on a well-deserved vacation. Now, I'm not saying they shouldn't have taken vacation. I absolutely support that. What I'm saying is they should have probably dropped the release early January instead, just so that they could actually react when the players were suffering. Now, when you say players, to me, this is a game. This is something that is somewhat playable and should be treated as such. Yes, I realize it's alpha or beta or whatever you really want to call it. But to me, it's a game that a lot of people purchase into thinking it's a normal game. They don't even realize that with the marketing material. I was one of those people. Now, a year ago, I had just started recording my YouTube videos, and I remember being incredibly frustrated sitting here thinking, how am I supposed to record content when I can't even log into the game? Now, a few weeks after that, the problem started to disappear. The game started to become playable. It was better, but it's still not perfect. What was very evident was hope. We are fresh off the tails at this point of a letter from the chairman where Chris Roberts himself stood up and said, we are going to make the game playable. It is going to be the year of playability. And the fact that it only took a couple of weeks to make the game playable, oddly, was something that a lot of the veteran players looked at as a very positive thing. These are players who are used to the 318 days where they went months without being able to log in, where they were so used to 30K errors that they didn't even really play the game in between patches. Largely, people would play for the first week after a patch and then ignore the game until the next patch came out. That's where we were a year ago. It wasn't a good place to be. And here we are 1 year later, after CIG has put out what is largely probably the biggest release in their history, Engineering. Engineering had the potential to absolutely obliterate the game playability and stability in every way that we possibly know, but it didn't. I'm not here to sit here and say that the game is perfectly stable or that it doesn't crash or I don't have issues. I'm not a fanboy like that. What I am saying is that I'm actually not afraid to log in and play for more than 20 or 30 minutes without thinking I'm risking everything. I used to be at the point where more than 30 minutes and I was really counting my blessings because I knew I was about to lose everything that I had on me. I would transport millions of credits of cargo back and forth between different stations, log out and log back in, just because I knew that if I didn't, the game would probably crash. Now, did that actually work? I have no idea. Probably not, honestly. I think it was just dumb luck. But now, where we're at today, the game is different. You can play for hours at a time without having an issue, even in the engineering patch. And when the game does crash, I simply log back in and it normally continues me exactly where I previously was. I think in the past 6 months, I don't think I've had a catastrophic failure to the point that I actually lost everything. Now, I remember a year ago, I actually ran a cargo mission back when I was doing trading, and I had used every single dollar that I had. I had 23 million credits on a ship and my game crashed. I booted back into the game with something like 200 credits, and I had to work my way back up with that. Nowadays, when it does crash, if it does crash, I log back in and the cargo's still in my ship. I log back in my ship. And even though that the crashes are very, very rare, as it happens to be, when they do happen, it's not catastrophic. That's my point. The game has become substantially more stable in the past year. Now, it's not without the bumps along the way, and again, I'm not saying it's perfectly stable. Crashes do happen. Inventory does get lost. It's not perfect yet. But what it is now is it's actually playable. Over the past year, one of the things that has changed the most, maybe even more than the stability, is just how playable the game actually is. A year ago, or in previous years, we would get 3 to 4 patches a year if we were lucky, largely with one major patch at the end of the year, maybe one around CitizenCon, one around IAE. But there really wasn't a reason to log in on a daily basis, or even a monthly basis, or even a weekly basis. Really, people would log in, they'd play for a week after a patch, they'd forget about the game for 3 or 4 months until the next big thing came out, and then they'd hop back on, play again, and the cycle repeats. Now, in this past year, we were getting new content on a monthly basis. This is majorly different, and I remember certain months this year where I was actually dreading the next patch that came out because I wasn't done the content in the previous one. They luckily extended it out, and yeah, it was because of bugs that I hadn't finished. But I actually had a reason to log in every day this year. Well, at least for about 6 months of it. Now, I'm not a combat player, which is largely why I did get bored of the new content, the new missions that were coming out, because a lot of it was combat focused. But one of the biggest things that I saw this year is that a lot of it wasn't combat focused. A lot of it was around the industrial gameplay, the things that I was actually interested in. This made a major difference to me as a non-combat player, as it gave me a reason to log in and come back. A lot of the events, a lot of the missions, and a lot of the things that they put together were actually kind of a hybrid, where you had the option to do it combat-based, or you could just haul some freight, or you could attack the people that were just hauling freight. It was actually a nice mix of what they intended the verse to be. This has made all of the difference. This is largely the reason that people kept coming back. This is largely the reason that we've had the most playable game hours this year or any year in the game's history. That's why this really was the year of playability. There was actually a reason to start the game up. Let's take a quick look at exactly what we were playing this year. Now, it all started about a year ago with release 4.0. That is Destination Pyro. Now, Destination Pyro came with a bunch of stuff, Pyro. But it also came with things like a transit system refactor, a quasi-grazer. I mean, can you even remember a time when we didn't have the quasi-grazer? A charge drain. They changed the multi-tool. And this is also where they stripped out a lot of the missions that we used to have. And they really did the mission system refactor. This was a major release that caused a lot of issues. That's expected. It was the end of the year. Now, quickly after 4.0 came Fight for Pyro. Now, Fight for Pyro is where they started to introduce the new storylines that they were going to spoon feed us for the rest of 2025. But it's also where they introduced the main three factions at the time: Frontier Fighters, the Headhunters, and the Citizens for Prosperity. Now, if you were like me, you were all in on the Frontier Fighters. They really had the attitude to kill them and kill them all. There's nothing we're saving in Pyro. Let's let Pyro be a true lawless system. Now, as we find out later in the year, unfortunately, CIG got rid of the Frontier Fighters and really just kind of tied them to an existing faction they had. And to me, that was one of the biggest losses of 2025. I think they could have done a lot with the Frontier Fighters, and it was a major lost opportunity. Now, next up, we have Supply or Die. Now, if you ever look at my mobi-glass in my videos and you see how many credits I have, this is largely where all of my credits had come from, Supply or Die. This is where they introduced a reward system, and what they attempted to do was introduce a line that a solo player could do, a line that a small group could do, and a line that a large org could do. I don't think that they actually accounted for people like myself who decided to go and do a large org line for every single possible faction that I possibly could. That's really where I got most of my credits, and I don't regret it. Next up, we have 4.1 with the Orbital Assault Stations. Now, this was called Orbital Assault, and they introduced those stations that hover over select planets or moons within the Stanton system. The idea being that you were supposed to work as a group and actually activate the laser, which opened up the mining area below. Now, it had its bugs, still does, but this was really a great an opportunity for a lot of people to get in and get into a little bit of conflict with smaller orgs. Unfortunately, this is also where they started to really leave the solo player out, because these missions are almost impossible to do as a solo player. Following that, we've got the Invictus launch week, and I'm pretty sure everybody knows what Invictus is, but essentially this is really a showing of the military power of the different manufacturers of ships within the game. With it, they introduced a series of new ships. I won't dive into the detail on exactly which ones. This happened kind of late May last year. Next up, we've got the Stormbreaker event as part of 4.2. Now, this was where they had that massive thunderstorm, and we really got a good taste for weather. To this day, it's still one of the most beautiful things in Star Citizen. But essentially, the idea was that you had select trams that you had to take into an area, and you had to do some missions within those areas, and you had to kind of fight for those contested trams and the areas beyond them. And this is also where we got a taste for the adult Valacar. Next up, we've got the Second Life Resource Drive that came as part of 4.2.1. Now, the idea behind this event was that it was a non-combat focused event where you were essentially hauling massive amounts of cargo, or trying to gain massive amounts of cargo, for the 4 different major organizations within Stanton. Now, there's a variety of different missions that you could use, so there wasn't fully non-combat. This was a little bit bugged because you could just use a Polaris and essentially kind of shortcut the entire thing. But that being said, it was still a fun event. And there was a lot of people who actually went and competed and achieved all 4 of the different organizations, which actually rewarded you with an additional armor set. So it was nice to see that CIG kind of bought into the idea that you do have some kind of diehards that want to go and kind of complete everything, if you will, like myself. Now, following that, we've got release 4.3 with Dark Territory. Now, this is where they introduced the new ASD locations within Stanton. Now, this was a little bit different because what they did is they honestly released a ridiculous number of ASD locations with the intention of only sending people to one of them. So you really should not have had any PvP at this point. It was really designed to be a PvE event. This was kind of a first for all of the different events within this year, and it was nice to see that they kind of did it this way. That being said, it was still combat focused, and this is really where I started to lose interest this year. Now, that was again followed up with Release 431 and Virtue's Descent. Again, in the ASD locations, you kind of descended further down into the ASD location itself. Now, this continued on a storyline, which honestly, go play it if you're interested in it. This was then followed up by Welcome to Nyx. Now, Welcome to Nyx was as part of Release 4.4. Now, this is fairly fresh in our memories, and I don't even think a lot of people have accomplished and played through all of these, but there wasn't so much a storyline to this as a series of different missions that you could take. Now, with this, it did see a restructure of some of the hauling missions to kind of their longer term goal. That is, things like the Hull C really shouldn't be used within Stanton itself, but the idea behind it being that the Hull C is meant for longer distance hauling, and something like a Hull A is meant for shorter distance hauling. So this is really where we've started to see that introduction of the different types of hauling missions, as opposed to you could really use just about anything for any hauling. Now, at this point in the year, a lot of people actually thought that CIG was kind of done. I mean, introducing another star system roughly a month before the year was up, we thought that that was our year-end event. Or our year-end release, really. But CIG actually really surprised a lot of people, and they introduced Dawn of Engineering. Now, that was as part of a Release 4.5. That was a release that we just got, where engineering itself was actually introduced into the verse slightly before Christmas. Now, what this means is we had two major chunks of functionality released back-to-back. This is largely unheard of for CIG, so I think it's left a lot of people kind of confused and almost overwhelmed. But that being said, I've played through with engineering, and it actually isn't as different as I think a lot of people were expecting. Now, it is also important to note that both Nyx and engineering were really just in the beginning stages. Unlike when they introduced Pyro, with Nyx, they did not introduce the entire star system. They only introduced select areas with the intention to introduce the planets and moons later. I think that this is a welcome change because it's really allowing us to get more comfortable with the idea of Nyx and actually going to Nyx, although there isn't a ton of reason to go there other than it is beautiful, and it is absolutely beautiful. But as they introduce the new planets, it'll allow them to kind of further along the storylines that they plan on introducing in 2026. Now, 2025 wasn't just about the stability and the playability of the game. They also introduced a ton of ships, 24 to be exact. Now, this wasn't just small ships. This was very large ships, including the Idris and the Perseus. Now, the Idris especially is kind of our first taste of a real capital ship within Star Citizen. So, I mean, that by itself is no small undertaking. But again, there were 23 other ships that were introduced. Now, this signals a bit of a difference in the way that CIG had previously done things. Previously, CIG had shown us a fancy video or shown us a picture, and the running joke was always that you're buying a JPEG, because there really was nothing else to it. People would buy these concept ships with a hope that one day they would be built. Now, there's still a massive backlog of ships that have to be built. But in 2025, CIG really knocked down that list and introduced some fresh new stuff that we hadn't seen before. This is really the first time that I can remember where a ship would be introduced and launched live into the game on the same day. Where people would be surprised at the new mining ship that was coming out or the new salvage ship that was coming out without any real advance notice. This is a very shift in the CIG's mentality, and it's actually a really nice thing to see. Now, I'm not going to dive into the specifics of what ships were actually done in this video, just because this video is getting a little bit long as it is. But know that with 24 ships, that's an average of 2 ships a month. That's impressive in itself, even without the playability and the stability aspects of what they had worked on. Now, I think that all three of the previous things that I mentioned, the ships, the playability, and the stability of the game, really helped to contribute to a major shift in the tone of the players of Star Citizen. Now, if I go back a year, the game was basically filled with long-term backers who were frustrated. There were a bunch of players who loved the dream, but hated the disappointment. And trust me, it was disappointing. Mixed with some amazing looking visuals and some amazing things, and then more disappointment. I had to summarize what the average player was a year ago, or at least their mentality. Really, the best way I could describe them was a bunch of cynicism mixed with a refusal to quit. It was a bunch of stubborn backers who didn't want to see the game fail, but at the same time, didn't think it could ever succeed. Now, it's completely different. Now what I'm seeing from the community is no more blind faith. It's really a more mature, measured optimism of the game that maybe the game actually can launch. Now, the reason I say this is pretty obvious. I mean, hop on Reddit a year ago, and a lot of the posts that you would see is that Star Citizen is a scam, Star Citizen is just there to con you out of your money. Nowadays, all I see on Reddit is people sharing their fleets. That's not all I see. Now, obviously, there's still the odd pessimist in the group. That's okay. But I would say that the average person has really shifted to thinking, maybe this is actually possible. Now, the evidence of this change to me is look at the record-breaking funding. I mean, they're going to break $1 billion this year. That's quite amazing. And if you look at the past 3 years, so in 2022, 23, and 24, their funding has really been relatively stagnant each year. Now, I mean, they're still making $110 to $120 million in each of those years. But really, there wasn't a lot of change. This year, they're on track and have already beat $155 million in funding. That's almost a 30% increase over the previous years. That shows, if nothing else, that shows how much more interest there is in this game this year over the past 3 years. Now, this is their highest year by far, and the increase in the amount of funding that they've made is actually equivalent to a lot of the previous years of funding in total. So if you take something like 2017, they only made $34 million in 2017. That means that they've increased their funding more than their entire 2017 budget. It's quite impressive to me. And to me, that's actually evidence on how much more interest there is in this game this year. Now, if that wasn't enough, look at the increased player activity. Now, again, you're trusting the numbers that come from CIG here. Fair. But they've broken almost every record they've got in regards to the amount of player activity there actually is. The longest sessions, how many times people log in, how often people log in, the max number of players that have logged in at one time. All of those records have been just smashed from all the previous years. That again says to me just how much more interest there is in Star Citizen this year. And it really indicates that major shift in tone from all of the previous years that I played this game. It's nice to see. Now, to me, personally, this year felt different. I'm not here to hype and say how great this game is. That's really not my job. I'm here to bring it as it is. Now, I'll be honest, this year was not perfect. The bugs still existed. The systems are still incomplete. The game is still frustrating sometimes. But at the same time, I felt like I had a reason to log in and give it a chance. Now, I know that there's still the skeptics among us, and good on you. You're welcome to come and join whenever you're comfortable. I get it. But to me, the game feels more playable than just promises. And this is the first time in my history with Star Citizen that I can say that's actually true. Again, I want to end here with a bit of grounded hope, not hype. This is 1 year out of the 13 years, I believe it is, that Star Citizen has been a thing. That doesn't erase the demons of the past, but what it does is it shows that maybe CIG is actually getting their stuff together. maybe they're actually learning from the mistakes of the past. And to me, hopefully, that means that 2026 is going to be an even better year than Star Citizen. Let me flip this on you. How has your year been with Star Citizen? What's your current impressions of the game? And overall, do you think that Star Citizen is actually worth playing in 2025? Or do you think that 2026 is going to be a better year? Let me know in the comments below. I'm really interested to hear your takes on exactly how you like the game today. This has been another video by Citizen Chaos, and I can't wait to see you in the verse.